When you picture a courtroom, you probably think of human drama, right? Justice being served to, well, human defendants. But what if I told you that for centuries, the one in the dock wasn't always a person? Sometimes it was a pig, or a rooster, or even an entire swarm of locusts. Yep, we're diving into the absolutely bizarre and fascinating history of animal trials. So let me just ask you straight up. Can an animal commit a crime? Today, that question sounds ridiculous, right? But for hundreds of years, in many parts of Europe, the answer was a very serious yes. And that belief led to some of the most surreal legal cases in all of history. And to really understand just how serious this all was, we've got to go back, all the way back to Falaise, France, in the year 1386. This isn't just some weird old legend. It's one of the most well-documented animal trials we have on record. And believe me, it is completely wild. Okay, so check this out. The process was shockingly formal. A sow was accused of killing a 3-month-old child. Now, the authorities didn't just put the pig down. Oh no, they arrested it. They put it in the local jail, just like any other murder suspect. It had a full-blown trial, was found guilty of homicide, and then the sentence. They dressed the poor pig in a waistcoat and pants, dragged it to the gallows, cut up its face and legs to mimic the baby's injuries, and then hanged it in the town square for everyone to see. And if you need any more proof of how formal this was, look no further than the executioner's receipt. The guy was paid 10 sous and 10 deniers for the job. And get this, he even billed them for a new glove because he didn't want to get his hands dirty executing a pig. This wasn't some random act of mob justice. This was the official state, at work, carrying out an orderly execution. So, the thing you have to understand is, this wasn't just some one-off, crazy event. These trials were happening for centuries. Which brings us to the real question here. What was the logic? How did an entire society decide that putting an animal on trial was a perfectly rational thing to do? To get inside the medieval mindset, we actually have to go back even further. I'm talking all the way back to the ancient Greeks. You see, this idea didn't just pop up out of nowhere, it evolved over thousands of years. So the Greeks had this concept called murder pollution. They believed that any killing, it didn't matter if it was by a person, a falling roof tile, or an animal, unleashed this kind of spiritual stain, a moral sickness on the whole community. This pollution could cause plagues, famine, you name it. The only way to clean it up was to formally try the offender, whatever it was, and kick it out of the city. Now fast forward to the Middle Ages. The church takes this ancient idea and puts a powerful new theological spin on it. For them, an animal acting violently wasn't just creating some vague pollution. No, it was a crack in the divine order. It was seen as an open invitation for demonic forces to seep into the community. So the trial, it wasn't just about punishment. It was a public ritual to restore God's law and put humans back in charge of nature. And this whole belief system became so official, so ingrained, that they actually developed 2 completely separate legal systems just to handle animal crimes. I mean, this was not some quirky village superstition. This was formalized law. So on one side, you've had the regular secular courts. These were the government courts, and they handled domestic animals, pigs, dogs, horses, animals that lived alongside people. The thinking was, since they're part of a human household, they have to follow human laws. But on the other side, you had the ecclesiastical courts, run by the church. They took on the bigger stuff, creatures way beyond human control, like swarms of rats or plagues of locusts. I mean, you can't exactly hang a million weevils, but the church had its own powerful weapons: excommunication and exorcism. And the list of defendants is just incredible. Besides our sow, there was a rooster in Basel that was literally burned at the stake for the unnatural crime of laying an egg, which people thought could hatch a monster. A donkey in Vanves was acquitted while its human partner was hanged. And then there were the rats of Autun. This case is my absolute favorite because it shows that animals were sometimes given the same legal protections as people. They were actually given lawyers, and some of those lawyers were really, really good at their jobs. Let me introduce you to a guy named Bartholomew Chesney. Chesney was assigned to defend a group of rats accused of destroying a barley field. Now the rats, not surprisingly, didn't show up to court. So Chesney argued that the summons wasn't delivered properly to every single village. The judge agreed. When they didn't show up the next time, he used this absolutely brilliant excuse. He said the rats couldn't possibly make the dangerous journey to court because the town was full of their mortal enemies, the cats. He actually argued the court had a duty to guarantee his client's safe passage. The judge, completely stumped and not about to order a town-wide cat roundup, just dropped the case. Incredible. So for hundreds of years, this was just how things were done. But then a huge intellectual shift started to happen, a revolution in thought that would eventually tear down the entire logical foundation for putting animals on trial in the first place. It didn't happen all at once. You can kind of see it happen in stages. It started way back in the 13th century when the theologian Thomas Aquinas planted this little seed of doubt. He suggested maybe animal crimes weren't evil, just a rare glitch in nature. But the real game changer, the one who really blew the doors off the whole thing, was René Descartes in the 17th century. And then, way later, Charles Darwin would swing the whole conversation in a completely new direction. Descartes' argument was truly revolutionary. He basically said that animals are complex, biological machines. They don't have a soul, they can't reason, they have no moral compass, they're just automatons running on pure instinct. And his point was simple but devastating. If an animal can't think or make a moral choice, how can it possibly be guilty of a crime? That single idea completely undercut the whole reason for animal trials, and slowly they just began to fade away. So the trials themselves disappeared, but those fundamental questions about our relationship with animals, they never really went away. In fact, they just morphed into the debates that we're still having today. I mean, even as late as 1916, you can see this horrifying echo of the past. A circus elephant named Mary killed a trainer who had been mistreating her. The public demanded revenge. So the owner, worried about his business, had Mary publicly hanged from an industrial crane in front of a crowd of thousands of people. It's a gruesome story, but it shows that the deep-seated impulse to punish an animal for its actions hadn't totally gone away. But the transformation in just the last few decades has been absolutely stunning. The legal conversation has done a complete 180. We've gone from asking if an animal can be guilty to asking what rights it deserves. In 1992, Switzerland legally declared that animals are beings, not things. New Zealand and Germany have written animal rights right into their laws. And for one brief, amazing moment in 2015, a U.S. court actually granted lab chimps the right of habeas corpus, a fundamental human right against unlawful imprisonment. And this whole evolution has led us to some really fascinating new puzzles. Think about it. If an animal doesn't have the moral agency to be a criminal, does it also lack the creative agency to be, say, an author or an artist? Which brings us to this famous photo. It was taken by a crested macaque who stole a photographer's camera and snapped this incredible selfie. A huge legal battle followed. Who owns the copyright? The photographer who set up the camera or the monkey who actually pushed the button? The courts eventually said a monkey can't hold a copyright, but the case forced us to think about a really deep question. We've literally gone from putting animals on trial for murder to debating their intellectual property rights. It just makes you wonder, what's the next chapter in this long, strange legal history of animals going to look like?